issue of elevated food prices and food insecurity have been one of the key discussion points at the World Economic Forum. Global food inflation has been elevated further, in large part due to the Russia-Ukraine war. And there are concerns about access to food as well as its availability. Well, to discuss this matter further, I'm joined by Sean de Cleene. He's the head of the Food Systems Initiative at the World Economic Forum. Thank you very much for joining us, Sean. Globally, what sort of impacts have you observed with higher food inflation?
So this week at Davos, we're discussing not just how rapidly food prices are adding to concerns about poverty and hunger and political instability and the catastrophic impact this is actually having on vulnerable populations. But we're also looking at the fact that we're not just talking about price increases. Actually, we're now looking at how can we deal with the fact that there could be significant food shortages as we go into the next season, with fertilizer prices spiking and the use of fertilizer meaning that going down significantly, and so yields will be lower around the world.
So what does a prolonged Russia-Ukraine war mean for global food staple prices? And even if there were to be a resolution, say tomorrow, how long would it take for things to normalize? So, I mean, even coming into the Ukraine crisis, on the back of COVID, we were seeing price rise increases in food. The Ukraine crisis has just exacerbated this even further. Last year, we saw 200 million people fall into acute hunger. And that could go up to as much as 350, 400 million people. That's 350, 400 million people who are on the verge of starvation around the world. And so what we could see a prolonged crisis over 1, maybe 2 years while the impacts of this unfold. So despite the challenges that we've spoken about, what are some of the solutions that can be spearheaded, particularly in developing countries, to better ensure food security, especially in the light of the fact that we don't really have strong fiscal resources like the developed world has?
So, I mean, let's be under no illusions. At the moment, we're talking about a food crisis, but this is also as part of a broader climate crisis. I mean, if you're a farmer in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, you've been hit with food prices and this sort of thing, but there's also been floods, there's been locust plagues, that's been happening elsewhere, and that ability to deal with shocks is going to be increased. In India, we've seen heat wave conditions of over 50 degrees, which are impacting on that. And so countries and farming populations on the whole are going to have to become much more resilient, and we're going to have to be much smarter at supporting those farming communities to do that, whether it's through targeted interventions or whether it's through getting the right data in so that countries can make smarter decisions. During COVID, Kenya actually created a data war room so that they could deal with the impacts of flooding and locusts and COVID and actually have the data to make sure that they were getting interventions to the right people, through electronic transfers in a timely and smart way, so that they could actually, they could recover in a timely way rather than waiting a whole year.
And how concerned are you, given this food crisis, if you like, that some emerging market countries may actually have to choose between whether they service their debt or buy food or, give food support to their citizens?
So I think that's right. I mean, each country is going to have to look at this differently as to how they respond to it. I mean, hopefully we can learn from the last crisis in 2007, 2008, when a large number of countries actually adopted ad hoc policies that had quite a lasting negative effect on food insecurity. And so I suppose that's what I'm saying, is that as they make these decisions in terms of how are they prioritizing issues in what will be a very difficult 18-month, 2-year period, the countries weigh up carefully the measures that they're putting in place right now to deal with the immediate crisis and as it affects the most vulnerable, with the need to strengthen and improve market transparency and make smarter decisions going forward, so that particularly those vulnerable populations, smallholder farmers in remote areas, are really not suffering
even more than they actually need to do. And so combining those priority humanitarian efforts with climate smart interventions, with coordinated investment decisions from the government.
Now, we know that the World Economic Forum really invites the brains trust of the world on various issues in various sectors and seeks to, encourage conversations among everyone and provide solutions to some of the world's problems. But there is talk these days of deglobalization because of everything that's happened with the pandemic, the disruption of supply chains, and so on and so forth. If this is indeed the case, does that not mean that some of the solutions that you're talking about may be actually difficult to achieve, given that there seems to be a lack of cooperation now than, say, a few years ago?
So, I mean, more than ever, I think at a time of crisis, we're going to have to take a coordinated response. And this is going to require an unprecedented level of cooperation if we're going to deal with this systemically. And so the need for those kinds of conversations is key. But also at the World Economic Forum, not only have we been discussing this week, at the annual meeting, but actually we're working with a range of partners to actually come up with a lot of those platforms that can deliver on those solutions, whether it's working with 100 million farmer platform to actually support 100 million farmers making the transition to net zero nature positive food systems, or creating a network of innovation hubs around the world that can react in much better to making innovative decisions, or whether it's building the sorts of digital data alliances between players like the UN FAO, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, and the Global Network of Research Institutes, CGIAR, to actually create much more transparent, inclusive, reactive data that can support countries and partners to actually make these sort of informed decisions. So it's both the discussion and the ability to act in a timely and smart way that's going to be so important.
Sean de Cleene, thank you very much, sir, for your time and insights there. He's the head of the Food Systems Initiative at the World Economic Forum.